What is going on, y'all? It is your boy RickyMoto. Welcome back to yet another video. So I've been getting asked so many times what GoPro do I use, what camera setup do I use, and what are my GoPro filming settings. So in this video today, I wanted to answer those questions as to how you can set up your GoPro to get cinematic footage for your motovlogs, for your adventure videos, whatever you guys may want. And there's really only a few settings and a couple of accessories that I use to get the cinematic footage that you see in my video. So without further ado, let's just jump right into it. Alrighty guys, so here we have my GoPro that I use for all of my motovlogs, and I gotta say it looks a little bit beat up. I know we're gonna be walking through the entire thing right here, the entire setup that I have going on, and we're also gonna be going through all of the settings that I use to shoot my motovlogs and get my cinematic footage. So let's take a look around. This is the GoPro Hero 11 Black Edition, which is the flagship model for the 11th generation. And this housing that I have on here, I got from eBay. It's like some off-brand third-party thing. It was like probably 30 bucks or so. And the reason why I opted for this housing is because it allows me to fit this mic adapter in here. This USB-C plugs into the side of the GoPro, into the adapter. And from the adapter, you have another USB-C for charging, and also you have an aux cord for your audio. And the mic that I use is the Purple Panda lav microphone, which is what I'm using for this exact video right now. So hopefully you like the audio quality and whatnot, and that's kind of how I set it up. This housing is compatible with the Hero 9 or the 10. This is the 11. They all have the same body style, so that's why it works for it. And yeah, we're gonna actually get it out of the housing so we can talk about the GoPro itself and all the modifications that I've made, along with the settings. So we're gonna unplug this, pop it right out. Now, if you didn't notice, the newer GoPros do have an integrated mount down here. It's built into the GoPro, so you technically don't need a housing, but the only reason why I still use one is because of the mic adapter situation. If I don't use this housing, I can still mount this on my helmet, but the problem is I gotta find a way to connect this, right? So that is why I don't really use the integrated mount in here. Now, looking at the GoPro, over here, we don't have the door. I completely got rid of it, and it's because the housing over here actually doesn't have enough clearance for me to actually open and close the door. Also, it just gives it a little bit more easier access to change out the batteries, change out the SD card, because I'm always changing out the batteries and SD cards on the fly, even when the GoPro is still mounted on my helmet. So that's why just completely getting rid of the door just makes it so much more easier. I can just reach in, reach out, whatever. I do have a piece of gaff tape here just to hold everything in, because when you are on a ride, you're exposed to the elements. You don't want your battery popping out mid-ride or anything like that. I just peel it back like so, and I can just change the battery really quickly. Same thing with the SD card. It's a very janky DIY method, but it definitely does a trick. And gaff tape is incredible because it's super sticky. It stays on. You can peel it off, put it back on like 100 times, and it'll still work. And it doesn't even leave residue, which is the cool part. This, I know, looks a little bit like what the heck is going on here. This is my ND filter, and it's kind of a DIY setup that I use. Basically, instead of using an actual ND filter that clips onto the lens, I opted for ND filter sheets that you can cut the size custom. And the reason why I like using that is because it's able to create a low profile setup, because yet again, the housing is so bulky that if I were to use a clip-on ND filter, it gets in the way. And another thing is, because I shoot in various lighting conditions, sometimes I gotta take it off, put it back on. So by using this method where I just use these sheets and tape it onto the lens, I can just peel it, take it off. And I do have 2 layers on here. So in very sunny situations, I use 2 layers. And then on semi-bright situations, I just use 1 layer. And then if it's nighttime, I take it completely off. So I kind of have my own little setup going here where I just peel back the tape, pull out 1 layer, put it back in, or take the whole thing off. And yet again, by using gaff tape, I'm able to reuse the tape multiple times. So it just becomes really handy. Although it looks kind of crazy on here, it definitely does the trick. Now, unfortunately, I don't know the exact spec of this ND filter, just because the one I'm using is from actually a Polaroid camera. It's designed for the 800 ISO version, so I don't know if that translates to like an ND 800. I can't confirm, but I will leave a link in the description below if you guys want to check out any of these components. I've been using this method since the very beginning of the channel, and it's been working like wonders. It actually started off as a very DIY sort of saving money hack, but it ended up being very versatile and useful compared to actually getting a clip-on ND filter. So moving around to the body, everything else is pretty much normal. There's really not much else done to it. let's power it up and show you guys the settings that I use to get these cinematic footage. So coming up close, you can see the image looks really dark, and that's because of the double stack ND filter. As for right now, this is the layout. I'm gonna go through my settings and show you what it is that I use to get all my footage. So the first things first, I am shooting in 5.3K, which is the highest resolution available on the GoPro, as well as 24 frames per second. 24 frames per second is actually the most realistic frame rate in terms of real life. It creates the right amount of sort of shake and motion blur, so that is why I stick with 24 frames per second. In terms of the lens view, I use hyper view, which is the absolute most widest fisheye kind of setup that is built in here. It just gives you a really wide field of view to be able to see your surroundings, especially when it comes to automotive content. And it also gives you the ability to crop in to your footage if needed in post. So I always suggest going the widest that you possibly can. Hyper smooth is the built-in stabilization feature, which I leave on. You can definitely turn it off if you want a more hyper realistic sort of shaky intensity kind of look, which I do play around with sometimes, but for the most part I leave it on just to kind of smoothen out the footage without having to add any stabilization in editing. Now moving down over here, there's a scheduled capture. I leave that off. Duration, I leave it on no limit because you never know how long you want to record for. Hindsight, I also leave off. So I leave a lot of the automatic features, so to speak, off because I want total control over my GoPro. Same thing with the timer and the zoom, everything is set on default at 1x. Now this is the part that is really important, the Pro Tune settings. So this is where I really control how the image looks and therefore get the cinematic footage. So we have 10-bit enabled, and that is pretty much giving you the maximum information that is being captured. So when it comes to color grading and whatnot, it doesn't destroy your footage. The bitrate is also set on high. I will say all these settings will actually increase the file size. And so you always want to have a pretty big SD card in here. And I'm using a 256 gigabyte. So you just kind of keep that in mind that it will eat up your storage pretty quickly if we're going to be maxing everything out like this. But we're looking for quality here. The shutter speed is double the frame rate. So since I'm shooting in 24 frames per second, I'm setting the shutter at 1/48. What that's going to do is give you a lot of motion blur and create that hyper realistic intensity look. And that's pretty much the main thing that gives you that cinematic look. It's a lower shutter speed, lower frame rate. And in order to combat that, because if you set these things, the image is actually to turn really bright because you're allowing a lot of light into the lens. And that is why it is necessary to use an ND filter to kind of combat that, depending on the lighting situation here. Now moving on over here, the white balance I leave on auto, the minimum ISO I leave at 100, and then the maximum ISO I pretty much bring it to the absolute maximum. So technically the ISOs on here are automatic, but it's kind of hard to adjust your ISO on the fly just because the lighting is constantly changing. So just by setting your minimum and maximum range, it'll decide what is the best ISO setting for you. My assumption is that because I have the ND filter and a lower shutter speed during the daytime, it'll automatically be running at a lower ISO, so you don't really have any grain. In terms of the sharpness, I like to leave it on medium. You can actually go lower than that. I don't suggest putting the sharpness all the way up, even though you might think, oh, you want it to be crisp, right? The thing about a lot of built-in settings for sharpness is that it's not very good. You know, you always want to sharpen your image in post. I always like to boost it afterwards, just because a lot of times the built-in sharpening, you can't really gauge how much it's doing, and sometimes it overdoes it. So I like to leave it on medium. The color I set on a natural color profile. I believe there's a flat color profile as well, which I use sometimes. That's if you want to do a heavier color grade. But for the most part, I just kind of been rocking the natural one for now. Raw audio is off, wind is on auto for some noise cancellation. And yeah, the media mod is automatically selected to camera mics. You want to set that if you are going to be using anything else, that like a third-party microphone that I'm using, just the shortcuts and whatnot that I don't really use. But yeah, these are the main settings that I shoot with, the Pro Tune settings, in order to get the cinematic footage. And that's pretty much the settings that I use on my GoPro. And all I do is just put into this housing, put it on my helmet, and just go on a ride. So hopefully that is, going to answer a lot of questions, because I know a lot of people have been wondering what my GoPro settings are. And all the footage that you see on the channel is pretty much shot with this GoPro with these settings. And you can always do your own color grade to, make your footage look the way that you want it to be. If you guys are interested in doing a color grading video with me, if you guys want me to walk through how exactly I edit my videos, just leave a thumbs up and leave a comment below if you want that. And if you are new to this channel, make sure to hit that subscribe button, as well as turning on the post notifications to see when I upload. Hopefully I was able to answer a lot of the questions for you guys as to what my GoPro settings are.